reiterating its stance, the centre has told the Supreme Court that privacy is not a fundamental right under the Indian Constitution. But how exactly will this position the impact or make an impact on the ongoing debate on Aadhaar and privacy? WION's Jessica Taneja with this report.
A 5-judge bench was set up to decide the constitutional validity of Aadhaar as mandatory to file income tax returns. The biggest hurdle facing the bench was whether the centre's decision violated an individual's right to privacy and if the data collected via the Aadhaar card could be protected. To clear things up, the Apex Court has now referred the question of whether the right to privacy is a fundamental right to a 9-judge bench. Earlier, petitioners in the Aadhaar case had claimed that the collection and sharing of biometric details like the iris scan and fingerprints amounted to a breach of the fundamental right to privacy. The trouble with Aadhaar has been compounding over the years. There have been reports that suggest that the data of 130 million Aadhaar numbers was linked from 4 government websites that deal with benefits like pensions and Manrega scheme. Since 2010, the UIDAI had blacklisted 34,000 centres after fake Aadhaar enrolments were reported. However, the government maintains that all biometric data is safe, but activists are worried about the safety of the database and the potential use of Aadhaar for mass surveillance.
This is Jessica Taneja with video journalist Sujoy for WION in New Delhi.
Joining me on the broadcast is Jessica Taneja, who filed that report. Jessica, thanks for joining in. I think there's some amount of confusion between the two parallel conversations, one on the right to privacy and the other, of course, on Aadhaar. But looking at the right to privacy, if it does in fact become a fundamental right, what sort of challenges do you think it could pose to the entire conversation on Aadhaar?
Well, Aisha, to understand where the right to privacy issue has actually come from is the fact that there were various petitions in the Apex Court the moment Aadhaar was made mandatory to file income tax returns. That is the stem of all the problem. And looking at what happened to this particular issue where even the Apex Court couldn't decide separately as to what needs to be done. Because in the larger context, it has always been a part of a common law. It has never been observed as a fundamental right guaranteed under the Constitution of India. And there have been various previous judgments which somehow haven't been able to clarify the kind of sequence of events that we're looking at now. That is the reason the Apex Court decided to have a 5-judge bench, which we saw today. It heard the matter, and in a matter of, I think, half an hour, they came to a conclusion that they need to refer it to a larger bench of 9 judges who can sort of decide whether right to privacy is a fundamental right or not. But the challenges are huge. There have been conflicting judgments in the past which talk about the issue of right to privacy, but nothing has been ascertained from that. So tomorrow is going to be very crucial, and in fact that could solve a lot of problems. We talk about privacy breach, we talk about data breach that is collected, and that will set precedents for Aadhaar being made mandatory rather.
Okay, we have time for one more question, Jessica, but what I want to ask you is, do you feel that the body, the physical body of a human being and the digital space are being looked at as two separate entities right now, and that can't really be done in a digital age that we live in, where there is a unification of some ways, and your digital identity is actually an extension of your physical being? Do you think that that point is coming up vociferously?
Absolutely, Aisha. And if we remember back during the summer break when the Apex Court was hearing the matter exclusively as well, the Attorney General, in fact, in his previous remarks, the ex-Attorney General, in fact, in his previous remarks had said that one does not have a right to their body. That made headlines in the entire media fraternity. But forgetting that fact, it is certainly a bigger challenge, because if you look at the data that has been kept and stored, you're talking about iris scans, you're talking about fingerprints. If a country does not have a privacy law and a privacy commission above all to oversee whatever data is collected, it is certainly going to create massive amount of troubles. And that is the reason this case is in point, because there is no privacy law that can protect the data. And given the kind of digital age we thrive in, I think every day we hear cases from Google or WhatsApp as to where the data is going, what sort of privacy do the individuals really require.
Right.
And that is exactly the kind of point we're getting at. And this, we're talking about a population which is nearly 1.27 billion. And in fact, not all of them of course, tuned for Aadhaar, but many, in fact, where does that go? Where does that lead us? How
Absolutely.
will it be protected?
The impact, of course, I mean, for better purposes, I might as well say that it's on you and me as well, and of course everyone who has Aadhaar cards. We leave it at that, Jessica. Thanks very much for joining us on the broadcast with those details.